A week or so, no, 2 weeks ago now, I put out an article in Customer 365. I will share the link at the end of the session, talking about the compliance issues with agentic voice. I saw a lovely little webinar done, I believe it was by Retail, about 3 weeks ago. They talked about what the rules are in the United States, specifically US General, with a little bit of conversation about things in California and Washington State, because that's where that particular lawyer was comfortable digging in deep. And I started to realize that there's a problem because a lot of us are dealing with multinational solutions, at which point the rules of the United States aren't relevant in other countries. You may have other rules and other things that you have to pay attention to. So the idea was is put out an article going over some of these compliance and other things that you have to pay attention to before you start selling elsewhere. And that led to this particular webinar. So it's a little bit more colorful than my normal slides, but it seemed appropriate for this. So if you look at what agentic voice looks like, in 2017, it was a promise. We got lucky if we got Siri or we got Cortana or some of these things to work over the last decade. But the reality is they didn't do the same kinds of things that we're now asking for. Telling somebody to go and program your schedule or make a phone call off of a little box for Amazon or Apple or Google or Microsoft, it sort of worked and had its own compliance issues. The fact that they were all recording everything that was said or done around the microphone and somebody was listening led to issues. But the promise of agentic voice has been around for a while. In 2024, it started to become real. We actually started seeing products that were capable of listening, doing the speech to text, understanding the context, giving the text to speech, and actually start putting out meaningful concepts. At which point businesses started asking, can an AI really hold a conversation? Can I actually do something with this? Then last year it was, can it actually make me money? Can it save me money? Can I do something real that actually will affect my business? Now we're getting the possible question of how do I scale them? How do I go bigger? How do I do it without it costing an arm and a leg? You've probably seen a number of companies, Microsoft, Amazon, a bunch of them are now telling their people, stop using agentic AI. It's costing us more than a human being would cost to do the job. And they're starting to realize that the savings, the functionality, the capabilities of regular agentic aren't living up to it. But voice seems to be the one that's actually showing real promise, real activity, real growth. So that people are still looking at the can it hold the conversation. Maybe they're getting to the what can I do realistic. And most of the people on this call are on the concept of how do I make money with this? How can I help my customers make money with it? So we've got a white paper that I've put out, which goes into 7 different use cases strictly related to the sales process. Inbound
Yes.
SDR, outbound SDR, appointment confirmations, rescheduling, all sorts of things that you can do today with working models that are up, running, and commercially live around the world. But as we look into it, how do we do this responsibly at scale? How do we do this legally and compliant are the next categories where people start realizing the risk of what we're doing. Okay. So there's a kind of maturity curve. Okay. Can it really work? Can it do the work? Can it work responsibly? How can it actually operate at scale? How does it actually work with the enterprise structure? And at some point, the CISO is supposed to stick their nose and go, what about security? What about the recordings? Who actually is controlling the data? Where is it stored? Who can see my customer data? Okay. And the further we go in the cybersecurity teams, the various management and ownership teams are asking questions. Where are the recordings held? Okay. Do I have permission to record? And there's a whole bunch of considerations that have to be taken into account for this. Okay. So now a lot of companies are kind of slowing down because they're trying to understand the risk and how it works. Okay. And everybody here is familiar with the questions. How do we govern it? Can we audit it? Can we scale it? Can we defend it? Okay. 2 years ago, Air Canada had their text bot, little chat bot, answer somebody a question about bereavement flights. It gave them the wrong answer. Finally went through the Canadian Supreme Court, which turned out and said, your chatbot told your customer on your website that this is the way the pricing works. You're obligated to live up to it.
Sure.
This is up to the case back in the early 70s, where some company in Boston, a car dealership, advertised a new car for 40,000 bananas. Somebody showed up with 40,000 bananas, which is significantly less than $40,000. And the courts held, you advertised it, you said it, it's your official communications, you need to give them the car. And the reality is, these kinds of organizational challenges are just beginning to be understood and just beginning to be pushed back on. So we need to be proactive about how we are checking what is possible, where it's possible, where are we leaving ourselves and our customers or our employees open to risk. Okay? So the questions that everyone has to ask as part of the process: do we have the appropriate consent? In the United States, the type of consent you need depends on what type of a call you are initiating. If you are doing an informational call, you need implied consent. If you're doing an actual sales call, you need informed consent, and you need it recorded. So your policy is about to expire. Would you like to renew? Is a informational. You do not need to have that. The fact that they have a policy with you is enough consent to let them know about a renewal. You have a doctor's appointment. Your appointment is tomorrow. Would you like to reschedule? Is informational. The fact that they scheduled it, the fact that you put I've accepted communications is enough. I want to do a cold call. I need them to have actually opted in, which is why you're getting a lot of the click to call back. Somebody fills in a form on a website, and then the AI calls back because it has been explicitly requested. And understanding the rules of this and how they differ is important. Can we prove the consent? Where do I actually have the documentation that they gave it to me? Internationally, do I follow the GDPR? Do I follow the CCPA? Do I follow all of the different legal considerations that there are for both recording, for consent, for even contacting people? What are the local do not call rules? What are the rules about all of the other activities? In the UK, they have the FCA. And Nir and I keep going back to that. He's tired of hearing me talk about it. In the financial industry in the UK, every communication, text message, fax, WhatsApp, Telegram, phone call, Zoom call has to be recorded and stored in two separate locations. Well, usually two locations, not always. One where the corporate headquarters or facilities are that are dealing with this. One of 6 regions in the UK where the customer is considered residing. So if they're going to sue you, they can do it locally. They don't actually have to do it. So if they live in Manchester, they don't have to go and sue you in London. They can sue you in Manchester, and all of the files are in the jurisdiction of the Manchester courts. Okay? What do we do when the regulations change? How are we following it? How are we tracking it? Okay? Can we audit our process? How can we prove that we're actually doing this? What is in our ISO 27001 audit process? How do I prove it when somebody takes me to court? And the hard one. It was once said that AI cannot make a decision because nobody can be held accountable. You're a business. Somebody is always accountable, even when the AI makes a decision. Who is it? How does it work? Who are you throwing under the bus? How do you protect them? And how do you make sure your board doesn't throw you under the bus along with them? Okay, these are just the beginnings of the governance questions. The more we learn, the more that they start regulating this stuff, the deeper these are going to go down and the more we're going to have to cover. Okay, so the bigger you are, the better the AI becomes, the more calls, the more risks you have. I'm handling 10 calls a week. The risks are fairly low. I'm calling 10,000 calls a day. The chances that one of them is going to cause a problem scales exponentially. So as it goes, the possibility of mistakes, the possibility that the AI is going to give the wrong answer or a dangerous answer becomes much worse, and your risk as a prompt engineer, as a company, become a much bigger consideration. Who's responsible where throughout this? Am I the agency that built the bot? Am I the company that updated the bot? Am I the company that owns the bot? Makes a difference, and all of you have certain level of risks. And to be honest, not all of them are properly covered under current cybersecurity and cyber insurance, cyber liabilities right now, because it's still very much the Wild West. We're still learning, and the insurance companies still haven't put everything out there. Okay? So basically, you come down to two real questions. Can I legally make the call? Do I have the right compliance? Do I have the right consent? Do I have the right authorizations? Can I connect the call? Can I record the call is the next one. Okay. Can I literally take the AI bot and transfer a human being from an AI bot to another human being? What are the considerations? What are the rules? Every jurisdiction has a different set, and I'm not going to go too deep into this because at 180 countries, there are at least 150 different sets of rules. Even the EU is not consistent on this, and there are 27 countries. So, as a very quick look, there are countries that have deeper requirements with restricted access. We've been talking about UAE, India, Singapore, various other countries where you can't actually connect the phone number directly to a cloud service. It has to connect in country. There are all sorts of other strong, deep restrictions. So in the US, the rules are fairly straightforward. I followed the do not call, I followed the appropriate consent. I announced that this is an AI at the beginning of the call, and I'm usually safe to go with so long as I keep the recording rules for the local jurisdiction. And remember, every state has a different set of one or two party consents. So sometimes you may actually have to put in the, hi, I'm Xbot calling from so and so company. This call is being recorded. Please let me know if that is a problem. Has to start every call. Okay. And it gets much deeper in different countries. China, Russia right now are incredibly difficult. Okay. So I went and put together, and this was part of the chart. You have different rules in each of the countries, and this is just a sample, determining how hot and it isn't. Okay. The TCPA requires the type of consent you require. Okay. Your telemarketing, your do not call lists are all different. And understanding each one depends on where your customer is located as well as where you're located. If you're doing calls from the United States targeting people in the United States, GDPR is not a requirement for you. If you're targeting people in the EU or the UK, GDPR now is. Okay, what privacy, what right to be forgotten, where you're allowed to record, how long you're allowed to do it, where are you actually storing the recordings? Under the current set of rules in Europe, for example, mostly you have to have the digital sovereignty considered, and the recordings have to be stored inside the EU proper, not in the United States. It makes a big difference for data sharing. Okay, UAE has a bunch of specific rules that are done by resolution, not by abbreviation. And if somebody wants to chat with me afterwards, I'll be happy to dive deep into any of these. I don't want to go too deep in this call. This becomes a management or board level consideration because of the risks. It's important for dealing with contact centers, revenue operations. Is the money you're getting, are you allowed to get it? Are you following the proper PCI compliance for people giving credit cards and not storing their credit card numbers in the recordings? What is the security you have
Up
on
the
security?
AOL in your computer or desk.
What are the security considerations you have on closing down secure interfaces, security of the data, security of the recordings, so they don't get hacked? Since these days, all we ever hear about is hacking. Okay, do you follow the compliance rules? What are the executive leadership or other responsibilities? Who is going to take the fall? Who is the target person on this? Okay, your CISO is going to hate the fact that it's usually going to be them because they're not necessarily involved in the process and will be going forward. So it's no longer a nice hobby toy or a nice thing to play around with. It's becoming part of the core infrastructure the way the telephone has always been. At which point it's now a core business function and it's going to require approvals from legal, etc., that have never been required before, and it's only going to get worse. So we need to pay attention to this. Okay. So most of the platforms are currently still worrying about quality, latency, how do I handle call prompting, conversational design, and workflow logics. These are the technical requirements that are necessary to make it happen, usually at the sound and the communications engineer and at the prompt engineer. But the fact of the matter is, what we're going to start seeing is the government's compliance. Who do you escalate to if there's a problem or a complaint? Where do you store? How do you handle recordings? How long do you store them? What are the rules about that? Okay, how do you audit everything? What are the operational or business controls? How is it integrated? Because you're now starting to see agentic voice agents connected directly into HIPAA compliant CRMs or other systems. So your agent now has access to proprietary personal information, and who has access to the data that the AI has now seen. Okay. If I'm doing this on retail VAPI 11 Labs or anybody else that's cloud, I have to make sure that they're holding my data properly, securely, and separate from everybody else's, because I can't have my cardiac patient's information stored out on a public place where anybody can get it. I'll get sued to death. Dogger has the advantage that you can do your own hosting, but then all of the requirements of securing it fall on you. So there are pluses and minuses to this. Okay, so infrastructure challenges are larger than AI challenges, but the accountability of these infrastructure challenges needs to be taken into account up front. Okay, so what we're finding today is AI agents are not directly a production voice system. So I have the different kinds of outcome, and I need to make sure telephony. Okay, this is specifically where Cloudonix falls in and where we keep the compliance and the security and store minimum data. Okay, then the infrastructure, okay, routing, recording, and security. This is partially us and partially the interface inside the agentic agents. Then I've got the agents themselves, the models, the orchestration, and everything with it. Then I get into the ERP, CRM, help desk, business tools, okay, which can be an incredible amount of data that I don't want public. Okay, and then on top of it, the actual revenue that happens with this. If an agent closes a deal, it goes into the CRM, the agent actually knows, and that data is now available, and I want to make sure it doesn't bleed. I need to make sure this is all very clear, very properly managed, segmented, and controlled. Okay, so today, the best AI is the best models, the best conversations, the best automation. Okay, and I'm sure everybody on this call has their own opinion as to who the best is for various aspects of that. Okay, going forward from this year on, the government factor is going to be part of it. Who is the most trusted, the compliant, defensible, and who is enterprise ready and has these things in place to be secure? This is the trust error that is going to become your competitive advantage going forward and selling it. We've done this. We know how to do this. We can make sure that you are HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, because we are making sure that they are built into the models and the infrastructure that is behind them. So what you need to do now, build your compliance into the design. Don't bolt it on. I usually like to think of it as security these days is usually a Band-Aid put on after the product is shipped. All too many products have done that, and it has blown up in people's faces. Design the compliance in from the beginning or as close to the beginning as you can. Make sure you have a database to prove and store the consent. Okay, you actually, just like when somebody signs up for a service, I consent to this service. I agree to have my credit card paid is stored with a specific date and time stamp. You need to do that with the consent going forward. And depending on the use cases, it's an incredibly different thing. And Chad, we've had a couple of discussions about what kinds of things there are about that in the past. Okay. Plan for your global expansions. Investigate the countries that you're going to expand to, and don't expand globally before you understand everything. Make sure the phone numbers that you are getting and the services, and this isn't even covering the KYC requirements of getting a phone number in some countries, but actually being able to service a customer in a different country or in the US, a different state, means that you have to understand the rules because it's not the same. California and Virginia have incredibly different rules on recordings, one party versus two party, for consent, for do not call. You have to make sure that all of these are covered before you start actively pushing into these areas. Create an escalation policy. Who is the human that is going to be handed off to when somebody complains when there's a problem? Treat the AI voice as part of the infrastructure. People have started to take the phone system for granted because it's there. I pick up the phone, it always works. We need to make sure that they understand that that infrastructure includes the agentic voice and it has to have all of this built in the same way. The earlier you do this, the easier it is because retrofitting it in once you've got huge customers with hundreds of agents on it that you now need to manage and go back and reconfigure your Salesforce or your HubSpot and everything to make this proper is a nightmare. This is why they tell startups or other companies, do your ISO, do your SOC 2 when you're still a small team with small systems and few customers, because once you've gotten to a particular size, it becomes a huge nightmare. Okay. Now, that's the end of the presentation. I'll show you the article in a second. The topics that are open for discussion are these or anything else. Okay. Will the disclosure become mandatory? My assumption is yes. They're moving that way very, very rapidly because they're seeing too many deep fakes, too many complaints. This is following the same model that spam used to in email. And they finally found out how to actually make spam cost and started nailing the spammers for millions of dollars in fines. Expect the same to happen for AI. Okay. Which country to deploy in, that's complicated, so we can discuss that further. What are the buying criteria? Who owns the AI voice governance in your company or customer's company? And how do you, as an agency, prepare? And that ends this part of the presentation. Okay, now it's changed 1 second. Do you see the customer article or do you see the steps?
Customer article.
Okay, so this article came out 2 weeks ago, and it goes into a little bit deeper discussion, including the table I just showed you. And I will put the link in. I have a separate article coming out later today, talking about how the PBX is important as an infrastructure that you need as part of your agentic voice services. And at this point, I'm going to open it up for the last nominally 15 minutes of the recorded for any comments or questions.
I have a question. Can we unpack where the biggest challenge is, and if the biggest challenge with compliance is it in the tool calling itself? And Cloudonix by nature is secure. Does that security and potential compliance extend out to the integrations as well? VAPI, DAGRA, retail. And
Okay,
yeah,
that's two very complex questions.
sorry.
Um, where the most complex part of all of this is partially depends, are you doing inbound or outbound?
Okay.
Inbound is a lot easier because having somebody request a call back, okay, which is the click to call back. I filled in a form, I've asked questions, I've given permission for a call, is much cleaner. The compliance, the consent is explicit. Okay, and I apologize, Chad. I'm going to use you as the example. One of the things
No
I seem to recall
worries.
Chad was talking about is one of his customers is notifying people that their insurance policies, 10-year insurance policies or whatever it is, are about to expire. Would they like to renew? Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So here, the implicit approval for a notification is fine. Selling them an upsell or phrasing it as this is a sales call isn't. So, hey,
Yeah.
Matt, your 10-year policy for X expires in 3 months. Would you like to discuss renewing with one of our agents? Is a valid outbound call.
Valid to what extent though? Is it once a day, 100 times a day,
Okay.
10 times a day?
How many times can I nag one person?
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but there is no law about how long before the person gets annoyed and uh, decides to block your number.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
This
there
is,
you could potentially just go from other numbers too. You could
yes.
so that might be more the wild, wild west that we're alluding to.
Okay. I will phrase it this way. How many times can your family members call you during the day to annoy you with petty nonsense and still get away with it legally? There's no rules. How many calls you make in a day is at what point have you annoyed them enough that they want to deal with it? That's not regulated yet. Okay.
Okay.
So long as I'm calling with the right type of call, with the right kind of notification, and I let them know this is the Mutual of Acme insurance company calling to let you, the AI agent for the Mutual of Acme calling to let you know that your policy with Acme is about to expire. Would you like to discuss renewal with one of our agents? That's
Yeah.
perfectly legal. You can do that once an hour until they start just hanging up the minute they get the first three words.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me to another question where you mentioned the whole banana scenario, which I find very funny. If the language your agentic agent knows exactly when the policy is going to expire, um, it knows it. You've prompted it the right way. It knows the policy is going to expire July 12th, and then it says somehow it just randomly says July 13th. How do we navigate those kind of risks?
Okay, I'll
Like
finish
we,
that and then I'll go back to Matt's second question. Um,
it's just like
Again,
that 1 out of 1,000. It just randomly says, I don't know how,
the
I don't know
problem
why.
is, especially if it's recorded, you're
Yeah.
on the hook for it. The company told them you have until the 13th. They renew on the 13th. Their policy has got to be honored, and that will hold up in court in the US and Canada right now. Okay.
Okay.
Um, your agent called with definitive corporate approved content. You are obligated to live up to that content as specified. This is the Canadian case where they told the guy $200 for a bereavement flight, and they're like, no, 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 it's a $200 discount on a bereavement flight or something. And they're like, nope, you told him $200. He has the chat transcript to prove it, or can subpoena the recording. You're on the hook for that actual data. Okay. So, Matt, coming back to your second question. Cloudonix is secure and compliant by design. The question of security and where we store recordings is something we're working on because we've had a couple of companies out of the EU requesting that call recordings and services are stored in the EU, not in the US. Okay. And it has to be done there's a difference between data sovereignty and data residency. Okay. Right now, we're seeing a request for data residency, which means we will store call recordings in Amazon Frankfurt, So that means that those recordings are available under EU courts. If they start requiring data sovereignty, that requires an entirely different Amazon platform, which is going to be a different pricing structure because we need to start duplicating systems. So there's a difference between residency, where is it physically stored, and is it completely separated from the ability of the U.S. Patriot Act to require that the U.S. government or courts can retrieve it. And right now, the way the law is written, if I'm using Amazon and it's stored in Frankfurt, the U.S. courts can subpoena and require it, even though it's not on U.S. soil, because it's a U.S. corporation. So there's a whole different set of rules, and the EU is kind of slowly figuring out the right balance between that. The whole data sharing between the EU and the US and GDPR and stuff, it changes probably about once every 6 months. And it's a nightmare because the US wants to have everything and the EU wants to give them nothing. And can we meet somewhere halfway in the middle? The courts keep throwing out everything that has been approved between the various governments. So they spend 6 months getting it approved, getting it live. Somebody challenges it in court. 6 months later, it's dead. And this has happened 4 times now that I know of. So Cloudonix can only guarantee and secure the portion that is running through us. So the Agentic, VAPI, Retail, Dogra, SynFlow, anybody else's connectivity between Cloudonix into Salesforce, that interface between them and Salesforce is on them. One of those two companies is responsible for making sure that that's an encrypted, proper connection and nobody else can sneak through and get unauthorized data. And this is where things get complicated because you now need to go and properly done. I now get an ISO 27001 2023 and a SOC 2 certificate from every platform that is touching my stuff. So I get it from VAPI, I get it from Salesforce, I get from Cloudonix, everything that says anybody that has, touches, or stores my data guarantees that their stuff is secure, and we're using the appropriate secure interfaces between them.
So
I haven't heard of that.
Is
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
so is that the call that is connected through Cloudonix through VAPI stops, and then once the tool call happens, accessing Salesforce, then that's when it's on
Yes.
them. Okay. All right.
Okay. But for you as the person designing it or the compliance officer, I need to make sure all the way from Verizon through Cloudonix, through VAPI to Salesforce, I have it all properly documented because eventually somebody's going to break in and with quantum computing and stuff like that, eventually it's going to be done. And I need to be able to say, everything here is certified clean. We did everything legally and physically possible to ensure the data was secure.
Okay.
And to certify and make sure that's clean, you mentioned SOC 2, and what's the ISO? I'm unfamiliar with
ISO
that.
27001 is a procedures and policy. So you get certified for the standard that says, I have proper security. I've trained all of my people on proper security. When we did it, we got into an argument with the investigator. He wanted to make sure we were using passwords that were 9 characters, one upper, one lower, one number, one special character. And we turned around and said, no, that's not secure anymore. That was secure in 1990. Okay. And he's like, so what do you do? We're like, we use passwords or passphrases that are Google secure. So when you put it into the Google password manager or to use it for a Google account, Google goes and runs more complicated algorithms to make sure that it's not easy to hack. Okay. Personally, I tell people that you should be using certain special characters because it screws up the databases. Okay. A space is a special character, the space bar. A comma messes up the parsing of the data. A pound sign, a dollar sign, these kinds of things make the algorithms that are trying to break it fail because they make the SQL or the other data queries a problem. So if you're going to do proper passphrases or passwords or things like that, you need to take into account that these are valid characters on almost all platforms. Other questions? We've nominally got another 5 minutes to this session.
Do you ever ask, are you ever asked for a BAA from HIPAA customers?
A BAA?
Business Associates Agreement, which says if you're handling healthcare data, you have.
We have a standard document for that at Cloudonix because we are a communication transit and we do not store the data unless you ask us to record it for you.
Mhm.
Or what we will normally do is we will record the call, store it for 24 hours so you can retrieve it under those circumstances. So we don't store any data, so we are considered a transit company, not a processor. The requirements are lower. We've had that
Okay.
request once.
Other thing I was curious about is you talked a lot about outbound calls. What about an inbound call, for example, an order taker? Are the
Okay.
rules the same? Do I have to disclose that I'm an AI agent?
Okay, if somebody is calling you, the consent is already there. So you need to disclose the I'm recording this call. Everybody's familiar with this call is being recorded for quality service, etc. nonsense. And everybody ignores it at this point because half the time it's just a warning that doesn't actually happen. Nobody knows when. From a business point of view, we are seeing it is a better response if you are upfront about the fact that this is an AI agent rather than letting people start talking as if it's a real person and then getting frustrated and annoyed because they're expecting it to behave differently.
Mhm.
So it's more of a best practice and a requirement at this point for inbound calls. Outbound is different. And then the difference of whose voice are you using? Is it a standard voice? Is it a cloned voice becomes the factor there. But the compliance issues come down to I have permission to record it, where I'm recording it, how long am I storing the recording is more of the issue on the compliance, as well as, again, the interconnect. Okay, so somebody calls in from a phone number, you go, this phone number says that you're Matt and you have this policy according to our CRM. You have to make sure that all of the interconnects are properly certified. But otherwise, inbound is much easier. In terms of compliance, inbound calls followed by click to call back, followed by outbound informational calls, followed by outbound cold calls are pretty much the easiest. Somebody calling inbound, they've already consented to having this conversation. Somebody who's filled in a form and says, I want to talk to somebody, has agreed to have the conversation.
Now, if I'm getting an inbound call, that doesn't give me consent to then outbound call them though.
That depends on how the call is processed. Would you like a callback as part of that? And they say yes, then you have a consent. Would you like
Verbal.
me to transfer you? Okay, you have to be very clear that they have opted into additional information from you. And
Okay.
you need to save that particular piece of data when and how they did it to make it work. But somebody calls in, they've consented to have the call and nominally to be recorded. Somebody has filled in a form and said, call me back because I want to learn more, I want to buy your product. This is explicit consent. Okay. Your policy is expiring. You have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. Would you like to confirm? This requires a different level of consent than hey, I've got this brand new great product. Would you like to try it? Which is the standard cold call stuff. Okay. For that particular one, do not call becomes your biggest headache. Because if you call, they say no, they tell you not to call again, you call a second time, that's $5,000 per incident.
Is
So you have
consent
to pay attention to that.
is consent attached to the DID itself, or is it attached to the org, where the org may have 10 different direct dial numbers that I could call chat with. He consented to number last 4532, and then
Okay.
call him 4535, 4537.
My understanding is if I'm doing calls, okay, and for those who don't understand, DID is direct inward dial. This is the number I'm calling to. Okay. If I'm doing it business to consumer, it's tied to the phone number. If I'm doing it business to business, it's tied to the organization. Okay, because the assumption is you as a person have a phone number or a phone number and a cell phone number that you have designated each of them how you want, do not call or call. Whereas a business can have 5 to 50 phone numbers for inbound calls or outbound calls, and you're now the organization is responsible for that. It's like I can't say you can't call my main toll-free number, but you can call this number. No, that's not the way the do not call. Okay, the do not call registries are per number, but the actual consents are per organization. Any additional questions?
As an
Eric,
agency,
yes.
go ahead.
No, please. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I'll just quickly, as an agency, what's a clear way to understand the levels and the lane of responsibility for around compliance, and maybe starting with tool call and traversing back. So that, yeah.
Again, sticking strictly with the United States for a moment, the type of call initiation and purpose are going to determine that.
Okay.
Okay. So again, informational calls, I need an implied consent. Sales calls or cold calls, I need an explicit consent.
Yeah. Thanks.
You had a question.
Eric, hi. This is Sushil here from Caprus Digital. We recently signed up. Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Eric and me. Hi. Being from India, my explicit question always would be the contact center space. How, and also the number play that is going to happen in that space. Yeah.
Okay. For you in particular, because you are based in India,
Yes.
it comes down to several factors. Inbound or outbound call center?
Yes.
What cloud service are you connecting to? And have you properly connected using the TRIA requirements for connectivity? Okay. So getting a phone number in India to connect to Retail Zappy or something like that, even Dogra, which is an Indian-based company,
Yes.
requires you to have connectivity in country, phone number through a local carrier into a local data pop, then it can leave the country. The actual phone call terminates in country before it gets connected to the agent. Okay, and this is the most complicated part for people to understand. We have the interconnects, we have the partnerships there. We're building out on that, so that's not a problem for us. But the second half, again, is the type of rules and consent. So for India, so I have the TRIA regulations. I have the
Yes.
TCCCPR, the do not dial framework. Okay, there are a bunch of different specific laws about recording, about who you can call, when you can call. India culturally is very different than the United States. Up until recently, India had a incredible policy where if I wanted to order a pizza or something like that, I would dial the restaurant, let it ring once, and hang up. then the restaurant would know that I'm interested and call me back and they would pay for the call. Okay. It's a whole different concept of how the culture, how the laws work. So if you want, I can take that as a follow-up call and we can dig
Sure.
deeper into that. But the specific rules are very clear in India, because for the last 3 years, over-the-top communications. I mean, they got to the point where in 2023, they started requiring Netflix and the ability to do chat with Netflix support over your TV or your phone required that you were connected to Bharti or one of the other VoIP providers that were connected to be able to have that conversation. So even
Yes.
when you were doing in-app call from Netflix to Netflix, you had to connect through a local provider. And this is where the TRIA rules first started becoming really important to follow up on.
Thanks.
So.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so Nir, I'm calling you back in to help close this thing out for the night.
I'm here. I'm here. Awesome. So, wow. You
Okay,
know,
I put the article in the chat if anybody wants to look for the link for that.
every time we talk about regulatory things and compliancy, I'm so glad you're taking care of it because if I need to take care of it, I would have drowned. Like, really.
It is a royal pain in the butt, but it's something that somebody has to deal with. And
Yeah.
I made the mistake of defining my job with this. I
No,
built it, I have to live with it.
yeah, well, you mentioned tri-regulations, and tri-regulations are so complex. I have no idea why they're so complex. Um, no, I
No, I
remember
can actually answer that one. India built
Vogons.
India went and built almost all of their laws based on the premise that Indian companies are selling to the rest of the world. So if Indian companies are buying services from the rest of the world, we're going to make it as god awful painful as we possibly can.
No, no, really, it's
He's laughing. He's not disagreeing with me. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. From
Yeah.
from selling services, which is the whole 1,553 days to get our cash out of the Indian tax authority, and other things, India is designed to sell electronic services in particular outward, development, design, call service, everything else is designed to sell out. So the rules are
Yes.
written to make it easy to sell out, but difficult to sell in.
yeah.
Why connecting an international LLM is so complicated, whereas connecting one inside India is a no-brainer.
Actually, that is a little bit like
It's an
this.
oversimplification.
It's an oversimplification because it is very much dependent on how the AI agent is connected.
This is what I was saying. You need to connect the phone number to something in country, then to the agent.
Well, yeah, but the so here's what happens there. So according to tri regulations, and this is the annoying part, it stipulates the following. Let's say you want to service a customer in Karnataka through a Karnataka phone number. Then the try stipulates that the server that receives the phone call has to be in Karnataka. The terminating endpoint has to be there. Now, if there is no infrastructure in Karnataka to do so, you can trombone it somewhere else. But the entity that needs to do it is the carrier. You're not allowed to do it yourself, according to what I remember. Uh, now, here is the funky part about that regulation is that once it's inside your endpoint in Karnataka, it no longer stipulates what you're allowed to do with it. Now, you are not allowed to pass it to abroad, let's say anywhere else in the US or whatever, as a telephone call, but you are allowed to convert it to something else, and then it's no longer a telephone call.
Yeah, the only way they let telephone calls was it was intercompany, not intra-company. So long as it was between your branches of your company, this is where the rule started.
Right, right.
Okay. So if I have a multinational where I've got an Indian office and a Texas office, once it connects to the phone switch in India, it can then be transferred to Texas, and that's no problem.
Yeah, by the way, same type of regulation applies to the UAE.
Yes.
And today I learned that the same thing actually applies to Turkey.
Yes. Turkey, Singapore, there are a couple
Ah,
places.
Yes.
but in Turkey there are some exceptions where if your endpoint is located in Europe, then they will allow you to connect to a Turkish telecom provider from Europe as long as you're able to prove that your system is completely static. Not only signaling, but also media. So, for example, all of the companies such as Vapi, Retail, Synflow, LiveKit, 11 Labs, they can't work in Turkey because all of the systems are completely dynamic and they cannot do media anchoring. And actually, this is one thing that Cloudonix can do. So we are able to go and do media anchoring, so we can definitely go and do that like we do in India and the UAE. So that's kind of something that tomorrow I have a meeting with somebody about that. But it's I think it's interesting from regulations are annoying. Um, they're challenging, but they're not set in stone. Well, they are set in stone, but that stone is definitely not unbreakable. It's not metal.
Every one of these things has its exceptions, its loopholes, and its ways to get around.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you actually have to spend the time and have the right experts locally
Yeah.
to understand the nuances.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, like I said, I originally started this article and then this webinar because somebody was talking strictly about the rules in the US.
Yeah.
The US is 50 distinct jurisdictions with 50 plus distinct sets of rules, okay, which isn't as bad as they are for taxes. Okay, there are 18,000 tax jurisdictions in the United States, which is completely nuts. But the idea is every state has a slightly different do not call, do not record, single party, dual party, um, informed consent or not set of rules that you have to follow. And a lot of this has been kind of glossed over up until now.
Yeah.
We're leaving the Wild West, we're getting to the wild regulated, and the lawsuits will start soon when somebody starts complaining that, hey, I live in a dual consent state and you don't have permission to, you didn't get my permission to record me, and they start suing this. And we need to be upfront and prepared for it, uh, because retrofitting it, like I said, is a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So as I have hanging up on the wall in my office, which is not the post the quote that Near put into his LinkedIn post, chaos where interesting things happen.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I prefer that. I prefer the why make things complicated where with a little effort you can make them impossible. I
And,
prefer that one.
and I'm going to close us out with the impossible we do immediately. The difficult just sometimes takes longer.
Cool. So,
So
moving on from regulatory and legal and the things that will make most entrepreneurs go to sleep. Honestly, like, but when you deal with telecoms, you have to be, on top of this stuff. Um,
To be perfectly honest, these are the kind of regulatory risks that people will start asking about going forward. So you can't ignore them. You
yeah.
want to get an investment, you want to get a contract, you want to get insurance, you have to at least be aware of the risks when they ask.
Mhm.